Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to the front line with Joe and Joe Pasillo and Joe Resinello. Joe, we're going into the breach tonight, and it's been a while. It's been a while since the vein was popping out of my head, but I'm angry. I'm effing angry. Okay, now I know a lot of people here. A lot of people listen to the front line with Joe and Joe, most of whom are pro-life. All right, but the bottom line is we're gonna talk about that later on. We might as well, Joe. We might as well try to chuckle a little bit, all right, to start, okay, because then I'm going to get angry. And by the way, if you're following it, if you're watching us here, remember that we're live on X, on Rumble, on Facebook, and YouTube. We go live 9 o'clock Eastern time on Thursday nights, and we're going to do this as long as we don't have conflicts. We're here every single week. We got a few clips for you tonight. You got Ditzy Justin Trudeau. I'm not using that word lightly. He's a ditz. Aside from a lot of other names we could call Justin Trudeau. Then he's got to deflect. He's got to deflect from the carbon tax, okay, which is killing Canadians, it's harming working Canadians, okay, to talk about Alex Jones, all right? So as though that matters to Canadians, but we're going to talk about that too. Trudeau got an education that we're going to show you, a real education from a member of parliament, basically telling him, hey, Justin, you know how this works? We'll talk about that. Joe's got a comment or two about Jagmeet also. Pierre Poilievre is really like, if I was a Canadian, I could actually get more excited about voting for him than I could about as an American voting for Donald Trump. All right. Because I just like his stones. I like the way he goes after the press. I like it how he goes back at them. We're going to give you an example of that too. And then later on, after we've exhausted all that, we have to talk about America. We have to talk about this idea of compromising, which, by the way, Joe and I have said this, and Joe, not that I'm not patting us on the back. We've said this before I heard anybody else saying this, how America, if Roe versus Wade was overturned, will choose abortion. And then God help us. God help us in that case. So we're going to show you what Donald Trump had to say. We're going to show you what pro-life activist Abby Johnson had to say. Joe, I want to make you laugh, Joe. Is it okay?
Go, babe.
I'm going to make you laugh. If you don't think Justin Trudeau is an elitist, this is a picture of elitism.
Hey, good to see you.
You know what makes me laugh about that clip more than anything is like when I think of somebody like addressing a crowd like that. Now, number one, it wasn't a crowd. He's looking down on the people like they're a bunch of ants, which to him they are. Like I think of Mussolini on a balcony, full of energy. All right, with the faces and doing all this, right? And here's Trudeau going like this. Hi, how are you? It's like this guy to me, Joe. If he wasn't such a farce, okay. Then I'm going to hand it over to you.
He should have had like a powdered wig, like in the French Revolution, in his powdered face. He should have came out with like a ruffled shirt and had like his handkerchief, like just waving it, like he was frigging Louis. He was the Sun King. It was nuts, dude. You can't make it up. You really can't.
It's like you're right. You can't make it up because like he's up there. It's so staged. Like I've said this before. Between AOC, like there's certain people out there in the public consciousness that are actors and actresses, and I mean literally. I'm not talking figuratively. Justin Trudeau was chosen, okay, to be the Prime Minister of Canada by the powerful elites who made it happen, if you know where I'm going with that, Joe Resinello, because he's got an acting resume. Why do you think AOC is in the United States House of Representatives? Because she's got a brain cell? No, she reads her lines well. She doesn't improv very well, but she reads her lines well. Justin Trudeau does the same thing. He's fed a bunch of lines. Now, you want to hear some lines that he's been fed? I want your comments on this, Joe Resinello.
Misinformation and disinformation. Any responsible leader that receives an endorsement and support from proven conspiracy theorist and liar Alex Jones would have immediately denounced that. But that's not what the leader of the opposition did. He did absolutely nothing because those kinds of endorsements fit within his political strategy.
I like to break it to him, though. Alex Jones is very popular. Most people look at Alex Jones like this. They think that much of what he says, he maybe go over the top, but they don't dismiss him as a crackpot either. Okay, because Alex Jones on certain issues has been shown to be right. Some things that we can't mention because YouTube and Facebook will take us down. But everybody out there listening to us at the front line with Joe and Joe know what I'm talking about. Go ahead, Joe. I'm going to throw it over to you.
Well, first of all, it's deflection. This has nothing to do with anything, but that's the name of the game. That's why all of this is pure theater. Alex Jones has nothing to do with Canadian politics. It has nothing to do with the suffering of the Canadian people, and he's deflecting. Justin Trudeau is very good at that. That's why he's been successful. Let's be honest. Justin Trudeau moved an ideology and he took a tremendous amount of power from Canadian people. So that's point one. Point two, Alex Jones is a little nuts. Let's be honest. I've listened to him. But Alex Jones also, and Joe Rogan has said this on his show, not that Joe Rogan is the end all be all, but Joe Rogan was like, Alex, you just have to tone it down sometimes. You need like a producer to kind of like filter you a little bit, because ultimately Alex Jones has said things well before many of these new world issues and this globalist agenda has come about. Dude, he's been saying this for decades. Alex Jones, and you could find the clip, predicted the trade centers going down. Predicted it, Joe Pasillo, because he read documents. He said, like I listened to him in an interview with Tucker. The only reason why I'm bringing this up, while he's a little nuts, I get it. He's not as, like, let's just say, a wacko as people like Justin Trudeau is trying to paint him. I'm not saying he's perfect. I'm not perfect. But there are things that he has been well ahead of the curve on. With that said, though, everything he said about Pierre Poilievre, he gets an endorsement, has nothing to do with Canadian politics. It's pure deflection. And at the end of the day, Justin, who cares? Talk about your issues, and the people behind them are just nodding. Pure circus. Frankly, it's nothing more than a show.
Did you see the one woman? Did you see the one woman behind him? We're not going to play that clip. She's kind of like this. She's like breathing heavy. I was like, oh, I wouldn't like to if I was there. But calm down, lady. Calm down. I know he's a good-looking guy. He actually looks like his father, Fidel Castro. But you know,
but I also like what Alex Jones had to say on X over this. He's like, "Thank you, Justin Trudeau, because you're giving me tons of like play. You're the prime minister of a humongous country, and you're acknowledging me." So like Alex Jones gets it. Actually, Justin Trudeau gets it too, because he's deflecting away. Do the Canadian people get it? Do the Canadian people just tune that out? Because that's exactly what you should do. All of that is nothing more than deflection in a show. Tune it out. Right. Look in your refrigerator. Look, in all my clips, this is how I end them. That should tell you everything you need to know. You don't need Justin Trudeau to badmouth Pierre Poilievre because he wants to axe a carbon tax that's basically putting you in the poorhouse by trying to like somehow pair him up with Alex Jones. Has nothing to do with the fact that you can't eat, you can't put clothes on your kids' back, and you can't put fuel in your car.
That's right. That's right. And let's stay on Alex Jones for a second. Here's the thing, too. You could like or hate Joe Rogan in the social media circle and everything else. Joe Rogan has a lot of credibility. You can't have that many subscribers if you don't have credibility. I agree with you, Joe. As an interviewer, as somebody who knows how to maybe get through and delve into certain topics with interesting guests. Joe Rogan has a lot of credibility in that way. So does Tucker Carlson. I don't care if the right hates those guys. Okay. They probably hate Joe Rogan less than they do Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson's been doing it for decades too. So you can't take away their credentials. Alex Jones was on with Tucker Carlson. If Alex Jones was wrong about everything in a complete crackpot, he would not have been on with Joe Rogan. He would not have been on with Tucker Carlson. Alex Jones has basically gone mainstream. Now, mainstream, real right-wing, not fake-o conservatives like we'll talk about later. And it's, as you said, Joe Resinello, he predicted a few things that actually came to pass. You mentioned the World Trade Center. Remember something also, a couple things about Justin Trudeau to get back to him. Number one, he's got usually those who are being called conspiracy theorists are those who have spoken about the New World Order. Again, Glenn Beck and Alex Jones a lot sooner than most people now. Okay, and you have to dismiss them as conspiracy theorists. Why? Because Justin Trudeau's one of them. He's one of the oligarchs. He does their bidding. How else could you impose on Canada, an oil-rich nation, a carbon tax and get away with it? Because your puppet masters in Europe at the WEF are telling you to. So he's got to dismiss that and attack that because he's a member of that inner circle. That's number one. Number two, to educate our audience a little bit. Many of them out there know, many of them don't. The words conspiracy theory were created by the United States Central Intelligence Agency after the assassination of John F. Kennedy to dismiss those who were asking relevant questions about that assassination. The CIA basically said anybody who says anything other that contradicts the Warren Commission is a conspiracy theorist, and that's how you shut them down. That has lasted now, and the culture warriors on the left have picked that up, and that's how they describe people like Joe and I, Tucker Carlson, Alex Jones, many, many people out there who simply do a little connecting. Michael Jones, simply do a little connecting the dots, okay? Which is all you have to do with these people. So I just wanted to make that point, Joe. This way people understand where that phrase comes from and the fact that Justin Trudeau is part of that inner circle. What say you?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Justin Trudeau has destroyed the Canadian people. And to be honest with you, he is like a star as far as the globalists go,
Oh, they love him.
I mean, he's a star. I even said this, like talking about it with my wife. If I was him, because to be truthful with you, when he does get ousted from his job, I mean, I don't think he could basically go into the public in Canada. I actually think he'll get killed, to be truthful with you. If I was him, he just got divorced from his wife. He speaks French. If I was him, I would move to Switzerland. And I would work full time with the WEF for about a decade, giving speeches, make millions and millions and millions of dollars. I would disappear for a decade. I would go live on the lake in Switzerland. He speaks French. He speaks English. He'll get by just fine. He'll live large. I don't think he can go into Canada after what he's done to regular people.
But look at what happened. Like, so you get like, you have this guy, he's going to wreck a first world nation.
He did.
Energy-rich nation. He's in the process of wrecking it. And then, yes, just like the other tyrants in history, then he's just going to keep it moving. And he's going to end up, like you said, either in Switzerland. My prediction is probably the south of France. But here's the thing. People need to speak out. You got members of parliament speaking out. They got to speak the language of the working class in Canada. That's the bottom line. And here's a guy. I unfortunately, for those of you who are watching the front line with Joe and Joe, I don't know this gentleman's name, but I want you to hear the lesson in basic home economics. Joe, you heard what I said. I didn't say macroeconomics. I didn't say microeconomics. I didn't say economic theory. I didn't say economic philosophy. I said home economics. That everybody in a home who has a home, who has a car and has to heat their home, and in Canada, a lot of people have to heat their homes, okay? Here's a little education for Justin Trudeau.
He actually doesn't know how food ends up on his plate. The farmer pays a carbon tax. The truck that picks up the farmer's food pays a carbon tax to take to the processor. The processor pays a carbon tax. The truck that picks it up from the processor to take it to the grocery store pays a carbon tax. The grocery store pays a carbon tax. And then Canadians can't pay for food. When will this partisan hack finance minister finally understand that carbon tax causes inflation?
Now, I don't know his name, but he makes all the sense in the world. But remember something. What he's saying is falling on deaf ears. Justin Trudeau knows everything that gentleman.
You're 100%. I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you said that, because so does the prime minister, by the way, because you don't count. What I mean by you, the Canadian people. The ideology counts. The problem is the free press should be banging on the drum. They should be saying exactly what that man is saying. And that's why they're the enemy of the Canadian people. That's why the free press is the enemy of the American people. They're not on your side. They're on the side of the ideology. And that's
Right.
why you have to turn it off. You have to get your news from alternative news sources. Listen, I'm not saying you got to listen to us. If you want to, great.
I am. I am.
But I'm just
Listen to us.
saying, you'll learn a lot. I will tell you that. But what I am saying this, though, the information is out there if you dig for it. And what that guy said is spot on. Now, listen, are the supermarkets taking advantage of the problem that was caused? He laid it out perfectly. Of course they are. They are. And that's what Jagmeet always bangs on. But he doesn't go to the nexus of the problem. The nexus of the problem is exactly what that guy said. And what people don't realize, particularly some people that aren't in the corporate environment, the cost always gets passed on. Like, I understand if you're 16 years old, you're 19 years old, and you don't know how business works, and you say, oh my gosh, the minimum wage, we should raise it to $25 an hour. They deserve to have this. Or, oh my gosh, we should tax the corporations so much. That just gets passed on to the consumer. The
Right.
person on the top is never touched. It doesn't work that way. That's
Right.
just
The only way that would work, and it'll never ever happen. I mean, this is like a first grader knows this. You have to also, if you want to do this stuff, you also have to pass legislation that the producers of goods and services cannot pass that cost on to their consumers. You can't do that.
can't.
You can't do that. You
Because
can't put
here's
it-
the thing: we live in a global global economy. Ultimately, you just leave. You go incorporate in Dublin, and you take all the jobs with you. If you and I run the company and you did something like that, we'd say, okay, we're closing shop, and you're going to lose XYZ jobs, and that's how corporations use leverage on politicians. But
Right.
this is like where people. I say to myself, like, if you're an adult and you're thinking, does it stink? Of course it stinks. But ultimately, the cause of the problem is exactly what that guy said. All of those costs get passed on to you.
Right.
And they never lose. You do. You do. And that is you know what that is, Joe? It's a regressive tax on the poor. It's a regressive tax on the poor because rich people can weather it. Rich people are not concerned. Like Justin
So if you
Trudeau,
have $100 gas bill and you're rich, and that $100 gas bill
Whatever.
goes up 60% to 160 a month, okay, you know what? Doesn't
Joe,
really matter
just
to you.
pay for it. Do you
Right.
think like Hollywood people or big shot corporate people or big shot politicians? No,
No.
absolutely not. They just pay for it. But you suffer. You suffer. And that is just the reality of it.
You're
It's
right.
the reality. And
Well,
and here's another thing about the corporate the carbon tax that I want to just
Right.
hammer home. Regular people, you are not in the position to support it. Like, get it out of your head. You are not part of that country club. You can't support it because here's the thing: you will be eating Raymond noodles every night. You can't even buy eggs. You'll be eating those college noodles. That's what you'll be eating when you ate in
Yeah.
college
Yeah.
because you can't afford to vote for this. And here's another thing. You don't believe me? Look at third-party research. We recently had an interview with the senior editor of First Things Magazine, and he laid out the numbers of the transition from an oil-based economy to a green economy. It's in the trillions.
Right.
It is in the trillions. And that cost, the majority of it, is getting passed on to you. And by the way, Justin Trudeau, he lives just fine. You won't. And that is where I say to myself, these men and women don't represent you. I'm being honest. Like, people have to step back.
Well,
And that's part of the thing that I want to basically impart to people. They're using you. They don't represent you. And people, we're not ready for it yet because ultimately the foundation has to be based on God to get people straight. Some people may disagree with me there who are listening, but I'm telling you the truth. Historically speaking, with that said, when we get there, we have to come together, because I'm going to tell you this right now. The fragmented society is exactly what Justin Trudeau and Joe Biden wants. They know they can control it through the press, through the education system, and they're doing a bang-up job of it.
They're doing a wonderful job. Well, they've taken over the institutions going back decades. If you're just joining us here at the front line with Joe and Joe, please do us a favor. Help us out. We don't ask you for money, but you're probably watching this on Facebook or X or YouTube or Rumble, wherever it is. Share the video. Please help us out. That's the only way our audience is going to grow, and we appreciate you being here, of course. Let's continue the conversation. Now, here's the thing. I think Pierre Poilievre makes sense. You know him better than I do. What I do like about him is the way he goes back against the press. Let's hope he's telling the truth about this. As vis-a-vis the carbon tax, let's hope he's telling the truth about this, because in this clip, I like both what he's saying and how he's saying it to these arrogant journalists.
Can you explain to me why there is a carbon tax in the agreement?
No, but the question is why.
No, I asked you a question. You keep asking
We
what
ask
the
the
agreement
questions.
is.
We're the journalists. This is democracy. We ask the questions.
Yeah, I have the freedom to ask questions if I want to, and I've just answered. I've been answering your questions
All
all
right,
week.
here's another one.
So no.
The government's introducing
Why would there be a
investment
carbon
tax
tax?
credit.
You're not changing the subject. I know you want to change the subject.
I want to ask
because you don't want to talk
I want
about
to ask a
Trudeau's
question.
carbon tax.
I want to ask a question because in a democracy
Sorry.
we ask the question and you answer.
And I decide the answer I give, and the
Yes, you do.
answer is this: we will axe the tax, and Trudeau can try to divide Canadians by putting a carbon tax in a free trade agreement that we already had for years. It won't change a thing.
It's misleading.
Because I will axe the tax, and I will axe the tax with delight and with passion and with incredible speed.
Now, everything he said, you got to hope, because Joe, I'm losing. I don't want to say I'm losing hope. I don't lose hope in a more general way because like we always talk about at the show and on our radio show on Veritas Catholic Radio Network. Our only recourse at the current moment, aside from getting out and speaking the way we are and getting out into the public arena and into the breach, got to stay close to God. Got to stay close to God, because you want to know why? Because did you see that in that interview? That guy who was pressing him, that's not the question. In a democracy, you answer the questions, and I ask the question, and you guys tell me what to do, and you got to tell me, and you got to, and then when Poilievre is in the middle of explaining to him very clearly exactly what the carbon tax is and how Trudeau is dividing Americans, misleading. Shut up. I want to keep my cool. I want to throw it over to you. Joe, but you know Poilievre better than I do. If he was to get elected, which I don't believe for a second he will, because I think the oligarchs are going to swoop in the same way they did in 2020 in America. But having said that, do you think he can win? And if you do, how do you think he would govern?
Well, I do think he's going to win, but I don't think he's going to govern with as strong of, let's say, bravado as he's putting forth now, because they're not going to let him. That's number one. Will he axe the tax? I do think that. Is the tax over the top? Absolutely. One thing I will say is when he said this is the democracy, no, it's not.
Oh, yes.
No, it's not a democracy.
No, it's not. Just like America's not a democracy.
Right. And that is where the facade is. It's not a democracy. We, the West, we do not live in a democracy. The people have no voice. The oligarchs have a voice. I read something recently which I thought was fantastic. It was something, and I'll give credit where credit's due, to Robin Williams. He said politicians should be like NASCAR drivers. At least the NASCAR drivers put their sponsors on their shirts. I think politicians should do the same. They should put their sponsors on their shirts.
Paying you.
Pfizer.
You got to tattoo their ass right on your forehead.
Citibank, Pfizer, Boeing. They should all, from Ted Cruz right down to AOC.
All of them. That crosses party lines, Joe Resinello.
At least the NASCAR drivers are honest. They have their sponsors. And Pierre Poilievre has his too. So will he be better than Justin Trudeau? Absolutely. But here's the problem. ESG, corporations are all on board with Justin Trudeau. Justin Trudeau is in lockstep with all of the institutions of power that control everything. every
that's right.
single one of them. And ultimately, you're just in the way. And why Justin Trudeau is great, successful, because he's deflected. He's basically projected. He has, frankly, lied. And he has done a bang up job to move the agenda forward. And he distracts people like that Alex Jones conversation. And that is what he does. And he's done that well. He knows full well what that man said. His job is not to focus on that. His job is to get your attention and move it to the side. His job is to divide the people.
Right.
His job is simply to divide. And as he's distracting you like basically a magician in Las Vegas, he's like, look at my hand here. Look at my hand here. With his other hand, he's pulling something out of his back pocket.
Or he's picking your pocket.
Bingo. And that is what he has done very well for 8 years. But sadly, all the people that control all the power, this has been, to your point, Joe Pasil, it's gone on for decades. It's gone on for decades. And ultimately, the pain point has to come up. I always reference Poland. Poland, the pain point was very high. You had a radical communist government in Poland for 4 decades. They suffered in World War II. 1 in 5 Poles or 1 in 4 Poles died between the Germans and the Russians. Then you had 40 years of communism. And then what happens? John Paul comes into the country. The whole entire country rallies. The whole country rallies, and they march out without a bullet fired. But we're not at that pain point yet.
Well, here's the thing. I want to encourage people out there, okay? Now, these people, what I mean by these people are the oligarchs, the New World Order types, the WEFs. They have tremendous power. Tremendous power. I think people don't understand the power that even Yuval Harari, that little homosexual troll, who says we have to, by the way, like people like power that he had at that time in the late 1980s, the Soviet Union. It was arguably in the time that they held the power that 70 years. Okay, were arguably the most powerful regime in the history of mankind. And yet, and this is what makes me hopeful, they were defeated by people who, as you said, reached that pain point. Where am I going with this? E. Michael Jones points out all the time, and I agree with him 1,000%. 1,000%. You got a lot of people, Joe, just enough. Just enough. I'm not certainly saying everybody. There's just enough people out there that through the promotion of sexual liberation allow themselves to be controlled, politically speaking. That sexual liberation is a form of political control, and there's enough people out there who will vote against their own interest. Now, what's in their interest, Joe? Axing the tax in Canada, that's in their interest, is it not? Okay? And a lot of other things that I'm sure Justin Trudeau is responsible for vis-a-vis legislation and regulations. Yet these people will vote for him anyway to make sure that they have their legal abortions, to make sure that all the other nonsense that they want to throw in there, gay marriage and everything else, because they're controlled politically. And they're controlled enough to the point where they tip the balance in favor of someone you would think in your mind is impossible to be elected the Prime Minister of Canada, yet there he is, sitting there in Ottawa. And I believe that. I think E. Michael Jones has backed that argument up plenty, and I think the same thing is happening in America. I want to get your comments on that, because then we're going to segue away from this and to America.
Well, I mean, that's a great point. I mean, there's definitely compelling things that enslave people, and politicians are aware of that, like an advertiser. Advertising, the art of advertising is to know the consumer better than you know yourself. And basically, you play on the weaknesses of the consumer. And that's how people make money. Mm-hmm. They're very smart. It's tactical. And politicians are tactical in rolling things out to control the population. They take your freedom while you think you're free, when in fact you're not free. To give another example, that is debt. They entice people into debt, large amounts of debt. They're slaves. Whether you make $1 million a year, if you're in a massive amount of debt, you're a slave.
Right.
And they entice you into that. That is the art of control. And that is what they do. And I would agree with you 100%. But what I'm talking about is a pain point that goes beyond that. When you look at like history, you could use, again, I'll use Poland.
Use Poland. Use
The
Poland. That's a
pain
perfect
point, a
example.
whole country united around John Paul II. We're not there yet. Ultimately, that is what will bring down globalism and the WEF. It will be a pain point where everyone unites a moment. And then the key is to keep that moment together. And sadly, people then start going astray and getting all crazy. And frankly, I mean, ultimately,
But that's the story of Joe.
that's
That's
the story of man.
history.
I mean, that's a story of man. Ultimately, we should be grounded on a foundation of God. And frankly,
Well, look, even Poland has a population. Poland is not a homogeneous society.
well, Joe, they just lost the
Right,
election.
that's what I'm saying. So
Yeah.
they've allowed after Lech Walesa led the Solidarity movement, okay, and they stood up with the help of the Pope John Paul II, as you mentioned. All right, and the KGB was there. They were there at that mass with 100,000 people. It's documented. George
And they were
Weigel
terrified.
documented. They
by
were
the way.
terrified. They said, "That's it. We're finished. We're finished. We can't control this."
And
We're
that
finished.
is, but that's the swell that needs to take this
But
down.
my point is, what does history do? 30
Well,
years
it's
later,
more- it's
they
more
invite
people.
them back. The Polish people invite them right back in.
Because you know what it is? People forget. It's the story of man. Like if you want to read something, read like the book of Isaiah, read the Old Testament, how the Israelites, it's up and down, up and down. It's the story of man. You could look at the West. We're too comfortable. And we, frankly, let things slip. And then what's going to happen is we're going to get uncomfortable. We're going to get very uncomfortable. But ultimately, when we do rise up, they will flee like cockroaches when the lights go on. Because ultimately, it is the people that are in control. But we have to get to that point. We're not at that point yet.
Well, what's going to happen, one of the things that can happen, and then we're going to move on. One of the things that could happen that would be a nice catalyst for that would be to do what you said a million times here at the Frontline with Joe and Joe. And if you're watching this video, please share our conversations. We would really, really welcome it. Is what you said. You need to open up the doors to lawsuits against news organizations when they slander people or when they lie about people. You need to drop that standard. You need to overturn New York Times versus Sullivan, and you need to strip the protections that social media has. Because I'll tell you what, when you look at those, and again, they won't agree with us. Joe Rogan is not going to agree with us on many things, but Joe Rogan would agree with us on a few things. Patrick Bet David on valuetainment. He's not going to agree with us on everything, but he's sane, is my point. Tucker Carlson would certainly agree with us on a lot. What I'm saying is Alex Jones's popularity is through the roof. Okay. My point is, with an alternative voice in the public arena, we could spark what you're talking about.
Joe, know what it is? And I agree with you 100%. I'm going to use George Soros as an example. You see, George Soros is playing chess while many of the politicians are playing checkers. You see, George Soros, what he's doing is he's moving things that are going to spark things downstream. For instance, he's trying to buy radio stations in America currently because he's trying to get a voice out. What he has done successfully in America is support DAs. It didn't cost him a lot of money because you don't have, it's not a highly funded, election
Campaign.
elected, and he influenced that. With what does that do? It brings down the quality of life in cities where people basically come to their knees and they beg Big Brother for help. They hand him their power.
Right.
That's the idea, and that's what he's doing. But ultimately, how do we play chess? You mentioned a couple things. We have to lower the standards of libel and slander. We have to defund education where it is not on the side of the country's best interest. Nationalism. Nationalism has been basically gaslighted in America like it's a bad thing. No, it's not. To be proud to be Canadian or proud to be American or proud to be Hungarian or proud to be whatever, Italian, French, wherever is a good thing. you have to defund those schools. This is playing chess. They play chess. We have to play chess. You cut the money. Another thing that you do is basically you have to hit them in their wallets. You control money. Did you notice this one this week? Netflix is funding. Woke Netflix is giving an $850 million budget to who? Mel Gibson, to put non-woke films out. And why? You know what their God is? It's not the virtue signaling that they
It's
put
the
out.
money.
It's money.
Remember how Holbrook plays Deep Throat in the movie All the President's Men. He meets Robert Redford down in the parking garage, and they're having their back and forth. And Hal Holbrook looks at him and he goes, "Follow the money, kid.
That's right.
Follow the money."
And this is I'm talking about how to play chess. You have to rally people to have financial boycotts on the corporations that are strangling you. You have to control the institutions that are controlling the colleges. And
Joe, I'm with you, but I want to say this to you. I think we have a certain advantage, okay? As a lot of people out there, in the culture war out there and fighting this battle. Okay, Joe, if he wants to play chess, why aren't we playing football, man? I don't care if you see what I'm doing or not.
I'll tell you why.
Real quick, Joe, let me real quick. I don't care if you see what I'm doing. I'm going to tackle your ass. I don't care if you see what I'm doing. I'm gonna go against you. In other words, you're playing chess because you want to be clandestine. I'm willing to put my ideas right out there in the public square because I know my ideas, our ideas, the ideas of many people out there, sane people in America, are better than yours. And I'm willing to play football on that score.
There are people much smarter than you and I who are saying the same thing or know the same thing. Now, to answer your question, why isn't it done? Because they control every institution of power and they won't let it happen. What happened to Epstein when he got arrested? He was found dead.
When the jury's out on that, but go ahead.
But my point is,
I know what you're saying.
when you push powerful people that threatens their power, dude, they're coming at you. And the problem is they control everything. That's why the Republican Party is a waste of time, because they're basically owned. And the Republican Party is a distraction. Fox News versus MSNBC is simply a distraction to divide the people. Turn them both off. Turn them both off. Look at the realities of your bank account. Look at the realities of how much your food costs. That's your news. Your news is your world in your house. How are you doing? Right. How are you doing? Shut Fox News off. Shut MSNBC off, because that divides us. And I got news for you. The powerful people who are above the divide. What do I mean by that? They got tons of money, and it doesn't matter who the president is. Right. If I'm worth $80 million, I got news for you, Joe. I don't care who the president is. I don't care. I get my way. I have my tax loopholes. Either party doesn't touch them because they're as rich as me, right, and we don't go there. So I don't care who the president is. But you do, the regular person, and they want you divided. They're terrified if you're united.
Well, here's the thing.
They're terrified, and they will leave like cockroaches.
Well, listen, but you want to know what, though? It's not. There's a lot of people out there, a lot of people under a delusion, Joe. I'm sorry. I don't mean to be insulting anybody. I don't want to insult anybody. I hope nobody's taking it this way. That Donald Trump's that uniter. Well, I'm going to play you something. I feel betrayed. I don't know if I'm going to get over it by November. All right, but I feel betrayed. I want to play this clip. And by the way, for everybody out there, don't leave because we're talking about abortion, because it goes to a larger conversation. I know a lot of people, Joe, they don't like to talk about abortion. Well, we do, because abortion is a symptom of a lot other problems that we all need to know about what's going on in the world. Like, again, how does the WEF, how do these people have power? Mostly through sexual liberation, and abortion is central to that. So listen to this, and then we'll come back.
My view is, now that we have abortion where everybody wanted it from a legal standpoint, the states will determine by vote or legislation or perhaps both, and whatever they decide must be the law of the land. In this case, the law of the state.
And that was enough to spark controversy within the party on this volatile issue, because Trump stayed away from supporting any federal ban in favor of the states.
I think people need to be very careful about the snake in the grass.
Former Planned Parenthood director Abby Johnson, now a pro-life advocate, believes the former president is abandoning pro-life politics, comparing his words to those who support abortion.
If women want to murder their babies, that's up to them. That's between them and their families, which is exactly what he said.
Do what's right for your family and do what's right for yourself. Do what's right for your children. At the end of the day, it's all about will of the people. That's where we are right now, and that's what we want.
See, that's not what I wanted, and that's not why I voted for him. I voted for him because Father Stephen Imperato said. Now, I believe Father Stephen Imperato that 5 Supreme Court justices, okay, Gorsuch, Kennedy, Amy Coney Barrett. I'm sorry, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, Amy Coney Barrett, Alito, and Thomas. We're going to recognize the right to life of every human being from the moment of conception. And Roberts talked them out of it, and they threw the trial balloon of Roe versus Wade. And they threw that trial balloon. And for all the garbage that happened, all right, you don't really see a lot of violence. You want to know why? Because what the pro-death people found out is they don't have to fight that hard, because we're not a pro-life country. We are a pro-death country. That's what this is what this is all about. And Donald Trump just took like a knife this long and stuck it in all of our backs. And Abby Johnson was exactly right. She's exactly right. And it speaks, Joe, to what you talk about. Donald Trump, by the way, just did something masterful. Not from our point of view, okay? He probably just got elected president, okay? Because most people in America agree with what he just said. Joe, I'm going to throw it over to you.
I would agree with that from a political perspective, absolutely. But for the good of the country, no. Because what people don't understand, and this is, again, a deeper conversation, abortion hurts women. Abortion destroys marriages because relationships are wounded as a result of abortion. And when marriages fall apart, children are wounded, and society, hence, is wounded. So it's not good for the society. But sadly, the horse is out of the barn, and the West has embraced this as their sacrament. Not just America, not just Canada, all through Europe, all through this quote unquote civilized world for decades. And sadly, there is no man that will stop it. God will stop it. It will be through an event, and that is for a later date. And
getting back to your pain threshold that you mentioned earlier. I did a video, Joe, earlier today. If you want to check it out, anybody watching us on X, I did a short clip, and I was focusing on somebody I voted for. I voted for Carrie Lake in this last election. I just posted on her page, okay, where she was commenting about this because she agrees with Donald Trump. I said, you're a disgrace, and I regret voting for you. Okay. Now, we don't have much of a following yet on X. That's got about 1,000 views right now. Okay. Because there's a lot of people who agree with that she's a disgrace, that she ran as pro-life, and now she's going to do whatever she can. The bottom line is that for decades, the Supreme Court said what the law of the land was, and the law of the land was Roe versus Wade. They tried to overturn Roe versus Wade in Casey versus Planned Parenthood. Justice Anthony Kennedy, supposedly a conservative, supposedly a Roman Catholic, was the one who tipped that, okay, towards and upheld Roe versus Wade. So, but what happened? America got what it wanted. America got what it wanted. Trump is actually right, and that's the saddest part about it. And Carrie Lake and others are going to join it. I wouldn't be surprised if Ted Cruz joins them. I wouldn't be surprised if Sean Hannity joins them. I wouldn't be surprised how many people who have called themselves pro-life are going to join Trump in this and say, you know what? It's a states' rights issue. If Alabama wants to ban it.
That tells you that they're married to power. And to be honest with you, that shows a lack of character. But here's the deal. America lacks character because they're on board with them. You see, this is where we're off, and that's why we're not going to get a political solution. We're not going to get a political solution, sadly, because, again, the pain point has to get higher. for people to see the truth on this, Joe, we could talk to her blue in the face on that issue till you're blue in the face. People are all about it. It's normalized. It's normalized behavior, and they're tapping into that. Why?
What's the next step, Joe? You mentioned it before we went on here at the front line with Joe and Joe.
It's going to be euthanasia. We're seeing that in Canada.
No, I'm talking about, and that too. We know that. Okay.
I mean, we're seeing that in real time right now in Canada.
I'm talking about like the Republicans.
Oh, with same-sex marriage normalized. It's going to be normalized. It's
Right.
absolutely, in many segments of society, it's normalized again. And that's not good for society in the sense every individual person has to have the same rights as an individual. But marriage as an institution, a man and a woman who form a union and have children and raise their children in a loving home cannot be replaced by a man and a man or a woman and a woman. It's impossible. Trust me, I have 5 kids. A man has a role and a woman has a role. You're different.
Right.
You're different. And here's the deal. Saying that that is equal hurts the society because, again, it weakens the society because it weakens marriage because you're not equal in that union.
Right.
As an individual, you are equal. But in the union, no. And again, talking to your blue in the face, people
that ain't going to go over. Joe, that's going to go.
But when the pain point comes, and it will, because society is falling apart, Joe, our quality of life is falling apart. What you're seeing in California is going to make its way across the whole entire United States. Mark my words. In time, what's happened in California has turned into a South American country. Uber rich, super poor, no middle class. That is how it is in California, and that is going to sweep across the whole United States, bar no place, bar no one.
I agree with you 1,000%. I do want to address this though.
And when that happens, it may be too late. What I mean by it may be too late, we may be stuck there for 4 decades. It could be 5 decades.
Well, you and me will be getting gone by then.
Comes. But I got news for you, and this is the truth. Donald Trump is not the Moses. What Donald Trump did do, though, is he opened up the kimono, we'll call it that, to the corruption that the United States government is all about. It is utterly and absolutely corrupt. And that, to me, was a gift. Because I've looked at how they have treated Donald Trump. And again, he's not my savior. But what I will say this, how they have treated him and why do they treat him this way? Because he doesn't have the NASCAR shirt on. They can't control him. You see, the other politicians are controlled, and they know it. And that's why a person like Nikki Haley, if she was to get the nomination, while they'll pretend to and they'll continue to divide, and the stupid circus continues, all a show means nothing. Turn it off. Turn it off. Donald Trump isn't controlled. Who's another one that's not completely controlled, and you're seeing it, how the media is attacking them, is RFK. They can't have that. And here's the deal. And this is what I'm trying to do. I know that we're far from that pain point. We're not getting out of this anytime soon. My job, the way I see it on this show and through my clips, is I want to open as many eyes as possible to the reality that's going on around you. These people do not represent you. Call yourself a conservative. Call yourself a liberal. Call yourself a Republican. Call yourself a Democrat. If you are a working person, you are not represented, and the democracy is a farce. It is a show, and the oligarchs wear NASCAR shirts. Boeing, JP Morgan. It's all about the
Miser.
Exactly. And that is what I want to bring up to people. And here's the deal. We have to find coalitions, and here's my coalition. And I'm throwing it to Canadians and to Americans. Children. Your children are being groomed in the public education system. They're being forced to sit through an ideology that affects everybody. Secondly, the economy. You can't buy food because of the policies. Don't get distracted. Turn off the news and look at your refrigerator. Look at your bank account. You can't buy food. And thirdly, freedom of speech. You have a right to speak whatever you want to. In a democracy, if you don't have that, you don't have a democracy. That is my 3-pillar approach to a coalition. And we'll deal with the other stuff after the fact.
Can I add something?
Power back.
Can I add something to that?
Please.
All right. So here's the way I see it. I agree with you on those pillars, let's say, for argument's sake. What I would add is, and I've made this point before, Joe Resinello. Funny, it's funny we're talking about this. Last night I was scrolling. I shouldn't be scrolling. All right, I should be going to sleep at night and whatever. I get a good night's sleep. I was scrolling a little bit, and I saw when Pat Buchanan. It was a clip from C-SPAN when Pat Buchanan announced that he was running for president. Now, Pat Buchanan would never have caved, and I've said this before. Donald Trump, Pat Buchanan. Or Donald Trump is basically Pat Buchanan's presidency, because Pat Buchanan was able to bring together a coalition, and they wrecked him. They brought in Bob Dole because they knew Pat Buchanan could not only win the nomination, he actually could win the election. Pat Buchanan would have never gone for this. Pat Buchanan would have pressured the Supreme Court to actually overturn Roe versus Wade by recognizing the right to life. But having said that, what I would add to your coalition is this: a truly pro-life stance. Because remember, there are 22 million Democrats for life out there, Joe, that don't like voting for the Democrats. But they do because of what I'm about to say is another pillar that I would add to yours, okay? Which is you got to stop chasing working people into the hands of the socialists and the Marxists. You have to rein in business in America. You have to start respecting workers' rights, family wages. You have to start doing that. You do that, you run. Joe, if you do that and you run on what you said, and you add social conservatism, okay, to the social doctrine of the Catholic Church. Oh, there's a bad one. There's a bad word, Joe. Sorry I said that, but it's true. Social doctrine of the Catholic Church respects the rights of business owners and private property. I read Rerum Novarum just the other day again for like the 10th time, just so I have it in my head, but respects respects the rights of workers. Okay, if you had that, I bet you could you become president of the United States.
Joe, those are 4 points, and this is where you see what I'm talking about is this. I'm talking about taking a step, and the step is this: I want my power back. I want the country to be back in the hands of the people. And then it's not a show. And then we have representatives that actually stand for the people, and they don't wear the NASCAR shirt. You see, this is what they fear.
Or they do wear the NASCAR shirt, but it says the people.
That's right. And this is what I want, because ultimately the fragmentation at this point is what they want, because they know when the society is fragmented, the distraction, the illusion that you are actually have a seat at the table and your vote counts, they're using you.
Joe, did you ever see the movie? Inglourious Bastards, Tarantino's movie?
No, I did not.
Now, his movies have worn on me over the years, and that movie came out a while ago, but I'm just bringing it up because it's an interesting point. So one of the things, Brad Pitt runs this group of guys during World War II, and they're basically killers. It's a typical Quentin Tarantino movie. And so many people get killed, a lot of F-bombs, all that fun stuff. Anyway, so Brad Pitt's character, every time they capture a Nazi, right, they carve a swastika into his forehead. This way, if he lives, you let him live, but he's going to have the scar of the swastika on his forehead. Now, I'm not saying, Joe Resinello, that that's what we have to do to our politicians. Let me be clear. But it'd be nice to see them with Pfizer, like the Pfizer logo or Joe, the Boeing logo, like on their forehead. I will tell you
this: if the people ever rose up, similar to what we saw in Poland, similar to what you saw in Czechoslovakia during the Velvet Revolution, they will run out of this country just like the Nazis did to South America. They were all Nazi sympathizers who went to South America, Joe. They will flee from this country like cockroaches because they're loyal to two things, power and money, and they don't represent us. And this is what I want people to see clearer. And Donald Trump, because of how they treated him, like him or not, showed you that. Donald Trump committed the same crime that Joe Biden did. He had documents. One could say that Donald Trump didn't even commit a crime. There's legal scholars that said that he has a right to those documents. Joe Biden was not the president. His documents was next to his Corvette in his garage, and they didn't prosecute him. How could you say, like him or not, that there's an even plane of justice? It's not. It shows you he weaponized his own government against the people.
Joe, we gotta go ahead.
No,
Finish your thought.
Donald Trump showed us exactly what the government is all about, and they're not about you.
Well,
neither did Trudeau. Trudeau showed that to you too in Canada. It's not about you. We have to take the power back.
Well, let's remember this about Trudeau. Let's remember this about Barack Obama. I meant Joe Biden. Barack Obama. Joe Biden. Well, whoever's the president right now, whoever actually has the power, they have declared war. Joe, I'm going to leave it with this. They have declared war on the American people. Now, Anthony, I did want to address something. Anthony, we're gonna get out of here, but I did want to address. You said Trump disappointed me, but he's the only choice we have. Anthony, come November, I'm probably going to vote for him. My disappointment with Trump is that, and I'm going to vote for him because less babies will die. I mean, that's the bottom line. You're not going to get another Republican to come in there that's going to beat him, and get the nomination, of course. And I'm not voting for that. I'm not going to allow the party of death to just, keep going and maybe get some judges. At the very least, I'm going to hope Trump, the first reason I voted for him in 2016 is that he'll appoint judges that are even more conservative or just as conservative as Alito and Thomas. So I'm going to vote for him. But remember something. He's shrewd. I'm hoping he's lying to the left. I'm hoping he's lying by saying this. I hope he's going to do something. I don't think so. I'm going to vote for him. But the bottom line is this. He really, at least on this, and we'll have on Father Stephen and Barato shortly, probably over the next week. We'll talk about it more to see if there's a strategy here. But the bottom line is that it shows what I forgot who it was that said we can, in the chat room, that said we cannot, put our trust in any of these people. They don't put your hope in them because you're just going to be hurt. I do want to say very proudly that Christina Jane is here, and I believe Christina is from London, or at least that's what she said. I hope she means London, England. And Christina says, I'm ready to stand up. I can't think of a better place to leave it. Joe Resinello, great conversation as usual. Please, all of you good people out there, if you're listening to this on X, Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, share it. If you like what we do, subscribe. Help us out a little bit. And if you like these conversations, we have great guests. If you like some really good interviews, we have all of our interviews. They're up on Rumble. They're up on YouTube. They're up on X, YouTube until they get taken down, of course. Same with Facebook. However, they're there. We have some really good conversations that you might be interested in, especially if you're a Christian. So we'd encourage you to do that. And thank you so much for joining us here. We had over 100 consistently, Joe, pretty much throughout the show, and that's not too bad. And help us build this audience. And remember, until the next time, that our conversation is your conversation, and that conversation is going on everywhere. We'll talk to you soon.